It's actually very difficult to follow Frank. I'm reminded of a time in the 1980s when I was asked actually on a weekly basis to do educationals for auto workers in a plant in Lackawanna in New York. And I always thought it was terribly unfair that my colleagues in these educationals were asked to talk to auto workers about automobiles, and I had to talk to them about economics. Now, Frank's done a great job, but I'd just like to point out that Frank is talking to the O'Flaherty Society about O'Flaherty. And my task is a little more difficult, but I think that Frank's done such a great job in terms of dealing with a lot of the literary substance that I won't detain you for too long here. And in terms of following up the two priests, maybe I won't talk any longer than the average Sunday sermon. Economists are not known really for their eloquence, at least not these days. I think it was different in the past. I think Dean Swift probably would have known, actually, economists in Dublin in his time and would have shared a great deal in common. Now, unfortunately, economists generally have the reputation as being a group of people who know the price of everything and, of course, the value of nothing. And this distinction between price, the price of things, and the value of things is very much at the heart of Swift's rhetoric, very much at the heart of Liam O'Flaherty's pamphlet on curing unemployment, and very much within Tomás Mac Síomóin's recapitulation, in a sense, in the 3 Leaves of a Bitter Shamrock, of Swift's famous proposal for dealing with poverty in 18th century Ireland. Swift, of course, as you all know, proposed that perhaps one could deal with poverty by selling, and alleviate it as well, by selling the children of the poor for the culinary delectation of the rich. What O'Flaherty proposes is that the unemployed should be utilized, I suppose, in the manner of domestic animals, dogs and racehorses, for the entertainment of the well-to-do. Mac Síomóin really does bring it up to date. Swift argues that the product that he's advocating be sold couldn't be exported because it was too delicate, and that it wouldn't, in fact, hold up under the salting that would be necessary in order to put it in barrels and send it abroad. And then he observes that, of course, that there's a very near nation that might be perfectly willing to eat the Irish without salt. And perhaps Swift might have been talking about the European Union, perhaps, other than these days, rather than the neighboring island. Swift's modest proposal is particularly current in this era of market fundamentalism. Increasingly, areas of our lives, areas which, and this is the origin of Swift's and O'Flaherty's and McSheen's satire, areas of their lives which we hold sacred are being increasingly subjected to the logic of the market, the logic of profit. The most dramatic example from today's papers, actually, is what I think is the impending privatization of our water services. Make no mistake about it, once you start to meter water, once you start to measure it, and again we're back with Jonathan Swift's rhetoric of satire here. Once you start to put a number on things, and Swift and McSheen spend a lot of time putting numbers on the children of the poor as part of their satirizing the concern of the well-to-do for these problems. Once you start to put numbers on it, once you start to measure it, once you start to charge money for it, once you start to make profit from its sale, then it can be privatized. And elites can start to use, in the case of water, what is really the fountain of life, for the purpose of private enrichment. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but in 10 years' time, I'd be extraordinarily surprised if we hadn't already spent a great deal of time debating the sale of Irish water in capitals, to private interests. This is regarded in economic circles as the height, really, of rationality, and the somewhat detached and rational tone of Swift's modest proposal is again really at the heart of the satire. Swift's narrator sees no reason why there should be no market in human flesh, especially as for a 1-year-old, the input costs are so much lower than Swift's supposed market price. For critical economists, however, these modest proposals are not actually so far from capitalist reality. Labor is currently sold on a labor market. Well, what is labor? Economists generally think about labor as one of the factors of production. That is, you combine labor with capital and land to produce products. It's a purely technical relationship. But what is labor? Well, labor is ultimately people. And so if we're creating a market in labor, we're creating a market in a certain sense in people, and that's precisely what Swift is satirizing. It's precisely, even more precisely, what McSheen satirizes when he talks about using the children of the poor in a kind of commercial adoption market. So we've moved from selling flesh to selling the whole person, in a sense, from year one out for the rest of their lives. The great and the good of Ireland today are not embarrassed to say that what needs to happen in this labor market is that it should be made more flexible. What we really need is flexible labor markets. Sounds like a great thing, but what is this flexibility? This flexibility is involved in putting fewer restrictions on the kind of labor contract which can be entered into. Fewer restrictions on the impositions which potential employers can make on their employees. And when you start to remove these restrictions and give employers increasing amounts of freedom to use the labor hired exactly as they wish, under whatever conditions they wish, for as long as they wish, as intensively as they wish, where does this loosening of restrictions end? And perhaps we should ask Jonathan Swift. Markets are generally about allocating products, that is, things which are produced for sale, and to the extent that they work best with this sort of thing. But of course, labor is not produced for sale. People don't raise their children for the market. And it's disastrous when things which are not produced for sale are allocated through markets. Something economists don't often recognize. But the great economist Karl Polanyi, writing after World War II, did recognize. What happens when you use the market to allocate labor? You can end up with drastic unemployment. And drastic unemployment is what we have today. If we didn't have the amount of immigration that we've had, the economy, or the society, I should say, would be in much greater trouble than it is at the moment. We should consider, especially in this regard, the very high levels of youth unemployment. Allowing the market to allocate labor has permanently blighted the lives of an entire generation. People who are unemployed for several years when they first enter the labor market, studies show never recover in terms of their ability to make a living. Okay. People who are unemployed in their first years are poorer when they retire than people who are able to find jobs when they were 21, 22. There are other things. Labor is not the only most important, or the only important element of the economy which is not a product produced for sale. There are other things that the market is not very good at allocating. One important thing in the economy which is not produced for sale is money. Okay, money is the credit which lubricates transactions. It's not often realized that private banking, in extending credit, produces money and produces it for free. This particular set of satirical works today, Swift, O'Flaherty, and Mac Síomóin, because really at the heart of these satires is a protest against treating people as commodities. And I think the fundamental issues which Ireland faces today revolve around treating things as commodities which should not be treated as commodities and should instead be held sacred. People are national and monetary sovereignty and the good earth itself. Thank you very much.